Two men are asleep in their flight suits, boots still laced, 40 feet from a helicopter loaded with 16 Hellfire missiles. Somewhere on the other side of the wire, a radio call is about to end that sleep in under 90 seconds. In the next 24 hours, this crew will eat standing up, argue over a card game, and fly a night attack mission using one eye pressed against a monocle the size of a shot glass. But the hardest part of an Apache alert shift isn't the flying, it's staying a person the whole way through it. Picture the shed. It's not glamorous. A row of cots, a coffee maker older than most of the crews who use it, a television nobody can agree on. This is where an Apache crew spends most of a 24-hour alert rotation, and the whole point of it is boredom. Deliberate, engineered boredom. Two pilots sit in full gear, flight suits zipped, gloves stuffed in a pocket, boots already on because the alarm doesn't wait for anyone to get dressed. You learn to nap sitting upright in a plastic chair. You learn to eat a full meal in 4 minutes flat because you might not get to finish the fifth. The smell in that shed is jet fuel tracked in on boot soles, instant coffee gone bitter in the pot, and the particular staleness of a room that never airs out because someone is always trying to sleep in it. Ed Macy, a British Army Air Corps Apache pilot who later wrote about his tour flying gunships over Helmand Province, described alert life as a strange kind of stillness sitting on top of constant readiness. Nothing happens and everything might happen. Both are true at the exact same second. That tension is the actual subject of this video, not the missile, the waiting for the missile. Here's the real question a shift like this asks. It isn't whether a crew can fly an Apache. Every one of them can fly it half asleep, sometimes almost literally. The question is whether the same two people who launch sharp and confident at midnight can still make a clean call at the tail end of hour 23, when the coffee's gone cold for the third time and the body has quietly started keeping score against them. Card games fill more of the shift than combat ever will. Spades, mostly, played on an upturned ammo crate. Cards so worn, the corners have gone soft as cloth. Crews trade the same 3 stories they've told 100 times, because on alert, the stories aren't the point. Being awake together is the point. Somebody always falls asleep mid-hand, chin on chest, and the rule is you don't wake them. Not until the alarm does it for you. It's a small mercy, and everyone eventually needs their turn at it. Food on alert is its own quiet negotiation with the schedule. There's no dining hall run at a set hour, because a set hour assumes you'll actually be there for it. Crews eat whatever survives being left in a bag for 6 hours. A sandwich gone slightly warm, an energy bar with a wrapper that crinkles loud enough to feel embarrassing in a quiet shed at 0300. Water from a bottle refilled so many times the plastic has started to taste faintly of itself. Nobody complains about the food out loud. Complaining about food on a 24-hour alert is a rookie mistake. Everyone else made peace with it years ago. Hygiene gets its own small, unglamorous set of rules too. A flight suit is not designed to come off in a hurry. Once you're strapped into an Apache, with a monocle over one eye and a mission clock running, there is no bathroom break built into the plan. None. Crews plan their water intake around it the way endurance athletes plan a race, drinking just enough to function and no more, because the aircraft is not stopping, and neither is the mission. It's one more small discomfort stacked on top of a dozen others, and by hour 10, none of them feel small anymore. Boredom itself turns out to have a texture. There's the fluorescent hum of the shed lights, always slightly too bright for anyone trying to nap under them. There's the specific silence of a radio that hasn't crackled in 3 hours, which somehow feels louder than one that has. Crews get inventive. Someone always has a deck of cards missing the 2 of clubs. Someone always has a phone loaded with the same 3 movies everyone's already seen twice. None of it is really excitement. It's a kind of low, patient vigilance dressed up as killing time. Because the alarm could come at minute 1 of the shift or minute 1400, and nobody gets to know which in advance. The alarm, when it finally comes, is loud enough to be felt in the chest before it's understood by the brain. Crews describe going from a dead sleep to strapped in and running checks in under 5 minutes, sometimes closer to 2. There's no time to think about it. Boots hit the floor. Muscle memory takes over before the conscious brain has caught up. You run to the aircraft in the dark, rotor blades already starting to turn overhead, and the noise swallows every other sound in the world. Cold night air, jet exhaust, the specific electric smell of an aircraft coming alive underneath you. Somewhere behind your sternum, adrenaline is doing what 6 hours of bad coffee couldn't. This is the first real cost of the shift, and it's the one almost nobody outside the community talks about. A scramble launch dumps a full stress response into a body that 10 minutes earlier was asleep. Heart rate spikes hard enough to feel in your ears. Hands that were slack a moment ago are suddenly precise, running through a start sequence that has to be right the first time because there's no second attempt once you're already in the air. And then, just as fast, that same body is expected to sit still in a cockpit for the next several hours and make judgment calls that get people killed if they're wrong. Once the aircraft is up, the second cost of the night begins, and it's the one that actually shapes how an Apache was built to be flown after dark. Both crew members fly using a system called IHADSS, a small eyepiece that clips in front of one eye and feeds it a thermal image pulled from a camera on the aircraft's nose. The other eye sees nothing but the real dark world outside the glass. 2 completely different pictures, one per eye, and the brain has to stitch them into a single coherent night on its own. Pilots who've logged thousands of hours on it still describe a low, constant strain behind that eye. Like reading by a single flashlight for 6 hours, while your other hand tries to write something legible in total darkness. Then the actual mission starts, and everything gets harder at once. A night attack call usually comes from troops already in contact, and the crew's first real job is sorting, not shooting. Sorting friendly heat signatures from enemy ones on a screen where both look like the same grey-white smudge from a few thousand feet. The gunner in the front seat is running the sensor, cross-checking a grid coordinate against what the infantry on the ground are actually describing over a radio that's cutting in and out. The pilot in back is flying, watching fuel, watching the horizon that at night barely exists at all. Every decision in that stretch has to be made fast and made right, because a wrong call at that altitude, at that hour, doesn't get walked back. It gets lived with. This is where the 2-person crew stops being a formality and becomes the entire point of the aircraft. An Apache runs on 2 tired people who have learned mission after mission to trust each other's judgment more than their own. There's a kind of isolation in that too, even sitting a few feet apart. Nobody outside the cockpit can see what either of them is seeing. Nobody on the ground fully understands what's scrolling across that monocle. For the length of the mission, the only other person in the world who really knows what you're looking at is strapped in directly behind you. The cold at altitude on a winter night is enough that breath fogs the inside of the canopy if the defrost falls behind for even a minute. The seat vibrates at a specific low frequency. Crews say they can still feel in their legs hours after landing. A kind of buzzing numbness that outlasts the flight itself. And underneath the visor, sweat runs anyway, because a flight suit, gloves, a helmet, and body armor don't care what the temperature is outside them. You're freezing and soaked through at the same time. Nobody puts that part in the recruiting material. There's no relief crew waiting in a break room if the mission runs long. Whatever happens next, this same two-person team handles it, tired or not, because there's nobody else on the ramp to hand it off to. By the middle of the shift, the aircraft needs fuel, and depending on the mission, more Hellfires or 30mm rounds for the chain gun. That happens at a forward arming and refueling point, a patch of ground marked out with chem lights where ground crews meet the aircraft without ever letting the engines shut down. It's called a hot refuel for a reason. Rotors stay turning at full RPM, close enough that ground crews work inside a constant wash of dust and noise that makes hand signals the only language that survives out there. The smell of jet fuel is thick enough to taste, and it clings to gloves and collars for the rest of the night. Rearming happens the same way. Crews physically haul and lock munitions onto the stub wings while the whole aircraft shudders around them, because there's no time to power down and restart cold. Still no relief crew, still the same two people running on the same tank of sleep from 6 hours earlier. Landing doesn't mean the shift is over. It rarely does. A crew brings the aircraft back down, shuts nothing off that doesn't have to be shut off, and waits to find out if there's a second launch coming. Sometimes there is. Command calls it retasking. Crews call it the hot seat, because that's exactly what it feels like, climbing back into a cockpit that's still warm from the last mission, with a body that never actually got to rest between the two. 15 minutes on the ground, maybe 20, just enough time to drink water that's gone lukewarm and confirm the next grid coordinate, not enough to reset anything that actually needed resetting. Debriefs after a night mission are short by necessity and thorough by habit, because the details matter and nobody trusts their own memory of them by that point in the shift. What did you see? What did the ground unit report? Did the coordinates match what came over the radio? Two tired people, cross-checking each other one more time before either of them is allowed to stop thinking about it. Then, if there's no second launch, back to the shed, back to the cots, back to waiting for the alarm to decide when the next 90 seconds start. Temperature does its own quiet damage across a rotation like this. A desert alert shift can start in 90-degree heat inside a metal shed with no shade worth mentioning, then end 6 hours later at altitude in air cold enough to numb fingers through gloves. The body never gets to pick a season. It just gets asked to perform in whichever one it's currently standing in, on no real sleep, with no say in the matter. Units try to protect against exactly this by rotating who sits alert and how often. Spacing shifts out so the same two people aren't pulling back-to-back rotations if it can be avoided. It doesn't always work out that way. Deployments compress schedules. Manning gaps compress them further. A crew that was supposed to get 48 hours between alerts sometimes gets less. And the math on what that does to a body doesn't care about good intentions on a whiteboard back at the operations center. This is usually where the shift stops feeling like an adventure and starts feeling like an endurance event. It's also where most videos about crews like this quietly lose interest, because nothing here looks dramatic on camera. but it's the part that actually decides whether the night ends well or ends badly. Fatigue researchers who study Army aviators have found something that should worry anyone who assumes tired just means sleepy. Actigraphy studies, tracking pilots across a training week, found the large majority logging well under 8 hours of sleep a day. Some closer to 6, with sleep broken into shorter, interrupted stretches rather than one clean block. Army crew endurance guidance openly warns pilots to avoid critical night tasks in the window between roughly 4 and 7 in the morning, the exact stretch when the body's own clock is fighting hardest to shut down, regardless of what the mission needs. That window sits squarely inside a 24-hour alert rotation. The worst hour to need a clear head is often the hour a crew is most likely to be flying one. Ed Macy's account of Helmand keeps circling back to this same idea from a different angle. He described the fear on those missions as almost secondary to the exhaustion. The danger was obvious, and the body reacted to it the way it was supposed to. But the slow grind of hour after hour on alert was the thing that actually wore a crew down over time. Adrenaline is loud, and it announces itself the moment it arrives. Fatigue is quiet. It lies to you about how sharp you still are, right up until it doesn't. By the back half of a 24-hour rotation, the ladder of difficulty stops being about the aircraft and starts being about the two people flying it. Radio calls get shorter. Not because the crew has gotten more efficient, but because forming a full sentence takes more effort than it used to. Checklists that were second nature at midnight get run twice, out loud, because neither pilot fully trusts that the first pass was clean. Still no relief crew, and now the sunrise that should feel like relief is itself a problem, because the switch from thermal night vision back to daylight vision arrives at the exact moment the body is at its lowest point of the whole rotation. Here's the detail almost nobody outside a flight surgeon's office knows about, the one worth building this entire shift toward. Researchers at the Army's own aeromedical research lab put 53 Apache aviators through eye exams before and after flights, measuring pupil size and how quickly each pupil reacted to light. The differences were significant enough to publish. After flying on that one-eyed night system, pilots' pupils responded measurably slower and behaved differently than they had before takeoff. A doctor could see the shift's cost written directly into a pilot's eyes, hours after the mission ended and long after the crew insisted out loud that they felt fine. Sit with what that actually means. The two people making split-second decisions with 16 Hellfire missiles and a 30mm cannon at hour 20 are the same two people who scrambled out of a dead sleep in under 5 minutes at hour 1. By now, they're flying with eyes a lab could prove no longer work the way they did when the shift started. They fly anyway, because the mission doesn't pause to ask if a crew is ready. The alert clock doesn't care what time a body thinks it is. No wonder crews talk about the last mission of a rotation differently than the first one. The first launch runs on adrenaline and training and feels almost clean. The last launch runs on willpower alone, on two people quietly checking each other's work a little more carefully than they did 20 hours earlier, because they both know exactly what their own judgment is worth right now. Not much. And they fly the mission anyway, because somewhere below them, people are still counting on it. That's the part that never makes it into the highlight reel. Not the missile lock, not the rotor wash at the refuel point, not even the scramble itself. It's a tired pair of eyes behind a piece of glass, doing math on a target at 3 in the morning. Because somebody has to, and the schedule says it's their turn tonight. Eventually, the shift ends the way all of them eventually do. A relief crew finally shows up. The two people who've been living inside that shed, that cockpit, and that fuel and cordite smell for 24 straight hours, hand off a warm aircraft and walk away on legs that don't quite feel like their own. There's no ceremony to it. Somebody signs a log, somebody else grabs the last of the cold coffee out of habit, not thirst. Ed Macy has said the strangest part of coming off a hard rotation was never the mission itself. It was how ordinary the next morning felt. Coffee, daylight, people around him with no idea what the previous night had actually cost. There's a version of this story that ends with the missile, the rescue, the dramatic radio call. This isn't that video, and on purpose. The 24 hours most crews actually live through are built out of cots and cold sandwiches and a monocle that quietly wears down a pair of eyes without asking permission first. That's the real shape of the job, not one dramatic hour. 24 ordinary, grinding ones, with a handful of minutes in the middle where everything that matters happens at once. So was it worth it? Every crew that has lived through one of these rotations will tell you the mission mattered, that the people on the ground counted on them being in the air when the call finally came in. But ask what the shift actually cost them, and the honest answer is rarely the danger. It's the 24 hours nobody else saw. The eyes that took the rest of the day to feel normal again. A kind of tired that a full night of sleep doesn't seem to fully undo. If you've pulled a rotation like this yourself, in the air or anywhere else, you already know exactly the tired we're talking about. Tell us how long yours ran.